Hello, I'm Dr. Richard Scott Noakes, and in part of our series of talking with pioneers in digital publishing and digital writing, we have Nina McNamara today. Now, Nina McNamara is the technical editor and a co-founder of Wattpad Publishing. In addition to her role as an editor there, she is a novelist of some note. She has two novels that are available at the moment, Icarus and A Bitter Spring, both of which I recommend. And she also is currently a senior consultant at a major multinational IT firm, which we will not be naming here. And she does technical writing and process documentation. So that job also has a lot of writing. And also, which we're going to get into later on, she was at one time a writer for what was at that time the largest content provider for the internet. Again, which we're not going to name, and the fun that you have with that. Thank you for joining us today, Nina. So tell me a little bit about your history. I gave that introduction, but it's way more complicated than that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history?
Well, thank you for having me, Doc. Yes, quite an introduction. See, I do have a very long history with digital publishing. I think it begins with college. I first saw the signs that traditional publishing was dead right around my freshman year when I bought my first textbooks. And it was my textbooks for my English classes, when I assumed that all of the books I was going to get would be really inexpensive, or at least online, or from the Gutenberg Press or Gutenberg Project, sorry. And no, I was paying $300 or more for those giant anthologies that everyone seems to get. And I've heard the prices of those books have not changed one bit.
They have not.
No, and that breaks
every
my
student
heart.
watching this can attest to that.
Yeah. Yes. And that was kind of the first sign. And the second sign was maybe a year or two later, I noticed the first Kindle and the first Nook went on sale from Amazon and Barnes & Noble, respectively. I think the first Kindle was about $400, so they were super pricey back then. And the first Nook was about $150, maybe $200. I can't quite remember. But both were extremely successful despite that. So ebooks were slowly starting to edge into the market. And right around 2011 was when Amazon announced that it had sold more ebooks than print books for the very first time. So that was kind of another sign that ebooks were just slowly starting to take over rather than print books. And in 2010, as we're about to talk about,
I know this is one of your least favorite subjects to discuss.
It is so
these students who are watching this need to appreciate the pain that you're experiencing right now.
It is so uncomfortable to talk about because it is a dark time in my life. I was about a year or so into a 3-year unemployment streak for myself, having graduated from college and not having a job with an English degree. Imagine that. I landed what I thought was my dream job for this conglomerate that you mentioned for the internet. This conglomerate no longer exists, thank goodness. But basically my job was to farm content, meaning trawl the internet, trawl Reddit, trawl whatever I could find for do-it-yourself helpful tips and all of that jazz. And it was soul-sucking. It was exhausting. It was just browbeating. It was absolutely terrible. I had to get up super early in the morning. I had to just log in to the group chat and pitch content all day and be rejected day in, day out. I would say the one upside from that job is I got over the pain of being rejected. Because I didn't have any respect for the people who rejected me after a while. But so that was probably the worst experience in my life because one, it was my dream job. I loved going to this site beforehand. I think after I quit this job, I did not go to this site for about a year or two. Just I outwardly rejected it. If I saw a link on the internet that linked to this site, I just said no, I was not going to it.
So before we
But
go
good.
on to, I know we're still talking about the history here, but
Yeah.
I just want to ask a quick question that came up.
Sure.
I know some of our students have said to me that they're interested in doing freelance writing, and rejection is a major part of freelance writing. And in this case, you were on staff. What would you say was your acceptance to rejection in terms of your idea pitches ratio of someone who is actually on staff?
I would say if I were to pitch 10 articles, I would say 9 of them got rejected.
Okay.
It was, and I was one of the better ones. So it was me and one other writer that was hired in this time. I would say I was the better one. 1 to 9 was my score.
So before we get back into this, one takeaway that students watching this should have is rejection is just a part of the game. It is a major part of the game. It is mostly what happens to you.
Yeah. And if you're looking to freelance, remember, you're not just freelancing for one publication, you're freelancing for a number of them. So be prepared to be rejected a lot, be prepared to be rejected often, and get over the pain of being hurt, because it's going to happen to you again and again and again and again. So there you go.
I'm sorry, I interrupted your history for that little life lesson for the aspiring writers. But anyway, so you left this unpleasant company you were working for.
I did. And I knew I wanted to go into business for myself. And right around that time, I think that's when I co-founded Wattpad Publishing, which we'll get to in a little while as well. But I knew that I wanted to write books for myself. I knew that the genre of books that I write is very specific. I don't write genre fiction. I don't write things that are commercially available to the public. If you pick up Icarus and read the first, 2 pages, you'll see, oh, this is not for general audiences at all. So I knew that I needed to do something for myself, and that's part of the reason why I helped co-found my own publishing company. But continuing on, around 2015, I knew the final nail in the coffin was dead. Or final nail in the coffin came for traditional publishing when the U.S. Second Court of Appeals upheld a decision that Apple had conspired. Apple, the company, that makes our cell phones that we love so much, they conspired with the big 5 publishing companies to fix the price of ebooks in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Which meant if you paid attention to the price of ebooks in, I'd say probably between the years 2010 to 2013, you noticed there was a huge difference in ebook prices and print book copies. You could buy, say, the Goldfinch for maybe $10, but the ebook price would be sometimes $20, sometimes $25. There'd be no consistency. Well, there was a little bit of conspiracy amongst Apple and the big 5 publishing companies to fix those prices, so people would be less interested in buying ebooks than they were actual print copies. Well, they can't do that anymore, so now you can buy ebooks at a much more acceptable price. That's when I finally knew, okay, these companies are so insecure and so terrified of ebooks taking over that they're willing to go through this in order to keep ebook prices out of the market. So that's when I knew that this thing is finally done. Traditional publishing isn't for me. It's really not for anyone. And for hopefully people watching this, if they're interested in e-publishing, but maybe are still a little bit hesitant and want to go the more traditional route, maybe that stories will lean them more in the digital publishing direction. But do you want me to give some advice to
I'd
authors
like to hear
advice
advice to your authors.
Sure.
Someone with experience.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think my first piece of advice, I really have 3 points of advice. The first, for authors, join a writer's circle or join a writer's group. That's either in person or online. You can sign up at a local community college. You can do what I did. You can go the traditional route and actually go to a 4-year university. You can take classes. You can find a niche group online. a niche group that's devoted to your favorite genre or what have you. You can join an internet forum. If you can't find one, you can start one. It just takes 2 or more people. It's really not that difficult. Also, you have the available tools to publish a book now. You have those tools available to you right now. You don't have to wait for one of the big 5, and by big 5, I mean Macmillan, Hachette, Penguin, HarperCollins, and Simon and Schuster. I think I got all 5 of them. You don't have to wait for one of them to give you permission to publish a book. I think the 2 big platforms right now are Kindle Direct Publishing, which is what I use, and Wattpad is the other one. Now, Wattpad has been getting some attention recently because younger authors are being published and they're being, quote, discovered by Netflix. I think there's a show, it's not a very good one if you ask me, but that's just my opinion, a show called The Kissing Booth on Netflix, which has been turned into a show via Wattpad. I think a teenager wrote this on Wattpad and it was turned into a show on Netflix. So there are other ways to get your content, your book, your novel, your series published that don't rely on the major publishers. So you have these tools available too. You can use them. They are available. Everything is now equalized. And then finally, and this is probably the most important piece of advice if I can give anyone, do not use any vanity publishing service whatsoever. If you have to pay for anything, you're being taken advantage of and you're getting nothing of value. And that includes agents, that includes publishers, editors, publicists, sorry, not other publishers, anyone like that. If you're spending any money, you're getting swindled. It's tempting in the pursuit of success to be seduced by charlatans who are masquerading as people trying to help you, but don't fall for it. If you are spending money, I know I'm repeating myself here, but if you are spending money trying to get published, you're being violated is the words I can think of, really. So do not spend any money trying to get published. I know our publishing company, we do not charge our authors anything to be published. That's what we have to keep saying, but no, we don't spend any money trying to get published.
Yeah. So is there anything that the writer who wants to publish electronically, whether it is on something that you're looking at a website on a browser or something you're looking ebook, they have to think about differently than a writer for print should think about? Or is it essentially in terms of content the same thing and then the changes come later?
Well, say more about that. What do you mean specifically? Like, are you talking in terms of form? Are you talking in terms of content itself?
Well, I mean, I guess both of those. So is there content that is simply not going to do as well in one medium versus the other? If a writer, I mean, sometimes a writer will be assigned something, they have to write what they have to write. But sometimes they'll have choices. And so what advice would you have about first the content choices?
Well, if you're writing just a traditional novel, there should be absolutely no difference. I mean, to me, a novel is a novel, whether it's on Kindle or whether it's in print.
Right.
If you're writing, like, say, something that's more visual, like maybe a children's book or a graphic novel, okay, maybe you want to do something a little bit more print. But again, with Kindle Direct Publishing, there is an option for you to select a print version. There are print versions of my books. Although, you can choose. You don't, again, like I keep saying, you don't have to rely on traditional print for these options. You can do this all yourself. Does that answer your question? Or
was there, so you also wrote a lot of nonfiction. You write nonfiction for a lot of your work. Actually, almost everything you write is nonfiction.
My day job is job is nonfiction.
And before, the nasty job you had was also nonfiction, or at least masquerading as nonfiction sometimes. Which is why they maybe don't exist anymore.
That's exactly why they don't exist anymore. They published too much nonfiction.
When you were thinking about like what you needed to do in terms of nonfiction, either to sell it there or to look good for the multinational that you currently, consult for, how is that different than writing fiction?
Let's see. Well, everything that I write in my day job, so my nonfiction work in my day job, none of that gets printed. And it doesn't get printed because it's under a confidentiality agreement. And it's mostly PDF work. It's mostly work that has to stay. It's like client agreements. It's contract work, contracts, I should say. Other process documents like this. For fiction,
which is something I think that people who want to be technical writers or professional writers have to think about is you may write things that literally no one outside your organization can legally see. Like you're not going to become, you're not likely to become, in fact, if you become famous for one of these, there's been a major scandal, right?
Yes. So that's another good point. Okay. So if I have written hundreds and hundreds of documents, my name is not on them. My group's name is on them. My team's name is on them. I cannot take credit for them. I cannot put on a resume that I've written these specific documents. I can be proud that I've written them. I can receive kind of like a small congratulations in a team meeting that I've written them. But I could not say, oh, look at this, I've written these documents. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to be proud of those documents later on. So then,
So then those are then a group effort in the end, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what is it like to do technical writing or any kind of writing when it's really a kind of group effort? It's not like, even when you're pitching articles to a website, your article's discrete, right?
Lose ego. Yeah, so you're going to have to lose your ego there. If you're writing for, the nasty job that I had, a lot of the work that I wrote for, I lost a lot of credit for. A really good example, pitching a lot of ideas that got shot down. And then the next day, one of the ideas I had that got shot down was written about by someone else. So that hurt a lot. But unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles. You got to roll with that. You got to take the punches. You got to roll with it. You got to let your ego sit. You just got to roll with it. Same thing with losing your name, not having your name on a byline, not having your name on a group effort project, not having any recognition for something that you may have put hundreds and hundreds of hours into. Does it hurt? Maybe at first. By now, no, it doesn't hurt at all. I've had so many hours of practice at this. Nah, doesn't bother me at all. And it also doesn't hurt when someone says, okay, write this document that's 50 pages long. Oh, and then by the way, we're not going to use any of it. Yeah. Oh, well, hey, at least I got the practice. At least I got the experience, right? No, I'm sorry. I lost 100 hours writing that, by the way. That sucks. Learn to find satisfaction elsewhere. So that's much better.
Yeah. So anyway, how is that different than? So you were saying like how that might be different from writing fiction. So how is that different than writing fiction? What parts of writing fiction are a group effort? Is there any part that's a group effort?
Yes, editing is a group effort. Like and that gets into my advice about editing. Writing fiction is. Let me back up for just a second. Your question about how that's like writing fiction. I really, really rely on my editor. I rely on my editor to bring out the best writing within me. My first drafts of anything, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, especially fiction, they suck. Like, they really, really do. I go back to reading my first drafts of stuff I've written in college, stuff I've written last week. They're bad. And they're like embarrassingly bad. And I'm a professional at this. I've written 2 books. I'm working on my 3rd. I've written, again, so many process documents. The first draft for everything is always really, really bad. I rely on my editor to make sure I have the best writing, like sometimes pried out of me. Mm-hmm. When it comes to my second draft, it's a little bit better. Go ahead.
Well, so I guess one of the things, this is less technical, but I think is important. So you talked about the ego issue, and the truth is, it takes a long time before you've got the ego beaten out of you. And so when you're an editor, you're almost always going to be working for writers who are in some way, not always, but frequently will be junior to you as a writer or less experienced as a writer. And they will have that ego and they will want to fight you. So how do you deal with people who don't really understand the role as an editor?
Learn to give constructive feedback and learn to give feedback constructively. I think as an editor, I think editors take on that role as conquering territory. And I think that's the wrong idea. I think your job as an editor, like I said, is to bring out the best in your writer. It's assisting them with improving their writing. It's not to go in and tear apart the author's work. Although it kind of is, to be honest. It's really to go, you have to make sure that the author stays on track, to make sure that their plot points connect, to just make sure that it's the author's job to get the ideas out. It's the editor's job to make everything connect. And you really can't have a good novel. You really can't have a good process document either without the 2 roles. So unless you have a good editor who, and again, there's a difference between a proofreader and an editor. A proofreader is someone who goes in and corrects grammar and spell checks. An editor requires attention and collaboration with the author, excuse me. So I really don't think there can be a really great book or a really great document or a really great any piece of writing without the 2 roles together.
So how is it different to edit someone's, or to edit a group project, some kind of technical writing or nonfiction writing? How is that different?
Well, when I'm editing, which I've done for Wattpad Publishing, I've got to remember that I'm not the writer. And that's hard to do. When you're a writer and you're editing, it's extremely hard to forget your place as the writer. And I've got to remember that this is not my voice. This is not something that I'm writing. This is something that comes from someone completely different. And I've got to remember not to put my thoughts, my words, my decisions into the piece as it's unfolding for me. When I'm editing something that's nonfiction, it's a little bit easier because there's no narrative there. It's just processes. It's just bullet points. It's just a list of things to follow. It's a workflow. When it's fiction, it's much harder because I'm constantly thinking to myself, why doesn't the protagonist do this? Why doesn't the plot do this? Why doesn't it make this turn? Oh my God, I can't believe he just did this. Why doesn't the antagonist do that? So you've got these 2 different thought processes going on at the same time, but they don't necessarily have to be too difficult. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So how does it? So my first editing job, I edited for an accounting firm, not an accountant. And so at Wattpad Publishing, the people who you're editing are super experts in their field. I mean, beyond what the public, and so they know far more about the subject than you will ever know. Sometimes sometimes there are parts of things that Wittan Publishing has done where when I first see it, I have to stop and do some research so I can even understand what the thing says, just to sort of give it an editorial pass through on my end. So, and talking to some of my former students who've gotten into editing jobs, it's frequently the case where you'll be hired on because they need an editor in this field.
Mm-hmm.
You're not an expert in that field. The writers are experts, but they're not experts at writing. And so what advice do you have for the editor who's dealing with experts and they're not an expert? How do you make that work?
Have a good set of resources, number one. So make sure that you are well trained, as best as you can. Don't try to wing it, whatever you do. Do not find yourself in a situation where, okay, I kind of know Old English, so I'm just going to go in and confuse thorns with evs, whatever. It might make sense. So have at least a good background. I think that's the first advice I'd give. I think the second is, when in doubt, ask. Like, go back to your author and say, hey, did you actually mean to do this? Did you actually mean for this to say this? Keep that communication line with your author open at all times, because it never hurts to just say, hey, did you mean to say what you did here? And go back to ask other experts too.
So when you were a student, you were not taught to do electronic publishing, right? You were not.
No, it didn't exist back then.
Yeah. So, and it barely existed. Like you started to have even ebooks. The internet existed, but it was all in its infancy. I mean, when you started your publishing company, it was completely pioneering. And so there was a way in which no one could have taught you the stuff that you needed to know. But, what advice did you have for the student today that's going to be different than what you could have gotten at that time? What has changed that maybe their older professors might not know, or if they have a book that's even 10 years old with advice, it's outdated. What should they know?
Gosh, what should they know today that I didn't know then, or what should?
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Or if you could tell us what they should know tomorrow, that would be great. I'd love to know that too.
I would love to know what happens tomorrow as well. So what could I tell people tomorrow? Oh my goodness. Don't say no to new technology. I think that would be my number one. Well, yeah, that's my advice right here, is when you see new technology on the horizon, don't run away from it. Don't think that this is going to be the end all be all, but also don't push it away. I think far too many people in our field, especially, and also in any field where things are written down, get really scared when technology rears its head. They cling to books. People love books. People love their books, and get so afraid that they're going to be taken away. No one is going to take away print books. Print books are sticking around. They're not going anywhere. But always embrace new technology as best as you can, even if it seems like it might go away in a few years. Don't run from it, because it might change the world. Okay. And I think that's all I have to say.
Nina McNamara, technical editor and founder for Wittan Publishing. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me, Doc.